Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So, when a brand new set like Streets of New Capenna comes out, it can have a massive impact on prices. And obviously, I'm not just talking about the prices of the cards actually in that set, which is quite fascinating just to see kind of what cards are demanding the highest price. Maybe they're going to be played in Standard, or in, Modern, or in Commander, or in multiple formats. Or a card might just have some unique art that appeals to players. There are a lot of different reasons why a card can be expensive. But aside from new cards and their prices, a new set can also have a massive impact on older cards and their prices. And that's what we're going to be diving in today because, yeah, certain cards definitely spike in price when a new set comes out, because they might pair with another card or really well with a commander. And there's actually one episode that I did during spoiler season where I tried to alert everyone of certain cards that might be going up in price because of these factors. But with all that said, let's jump into some of the cards that had the biggest spikes because of Streets of New Capenna. So how I'm going to go about this is I'm going to talk about the card that actually caused the price spike, or at least one of the main factors that caused this. So the first card I'm going to talk about is Vazi Key Negotiator. Now, Vazi is a very unique commander, and when it comes to unique commanders, those tend to also go along with some price spikes a good amount of the time. Vazi is a 3/3 human advisor with haste that has tap. Target opponent creates X treasure tokens, where X the number of treasure tokens you created this turn. And also, whenever an opponent casts a spell or activates an ability, if mana from a treasure was spent to cast or activate it, put a +1 counter on target creature, then draw a card. So again, a very unique commander, one that we really haven't seen before, that actually can give your opponents treasure tokens. And because that unique effect, and I'm sure because there are other fantastic treasure synergies in this set, well, a certain card spiked in price. And that card would be Viridian Revel, an enchantment for 1 green that says, whenever an artifact is put into an opponent's graveyard from the battlefield, you may draw a card. Now, really quick, I did point this out on another episode, but I just want to make sure there's no confusion because there were definitely some comments around this kind of effect. But essentially, yes, a token does technically hit the graveyard, including treasure tokens when they're sacrificed for mana. So yeah, obviously because of that, Viridian Revel is absolutely incredible in combination with a commander that can give your opponents a lot of treasures, and when they start utilizing them, you draw an absurd amount of cards. Now, obviously your opponents can choose not to utilize those treasures that you're so generously giving them, but of course there are other ways to ensure that those treasures hit their graveyard in one way or another. I mean, Vandal Blast. So now let's take a look at mtgstocks.com to see the price history on this card. And if you haven't seen that website yet, it is a fantastic one, so make sure you go check it out. Regardless, as you can see, over the past year or so, this card has gone up in price slightly. There definitely have been more and more treasure synergies and different kinds of treasure cards that have come up. And yes, this card definitely went up between September and October to around $2 or so, but then it went back down again. I mean, originally this was like a 19-cent card or something before that, and right before this new commander was spoiled, well, its price was less than $1, but that is definitely not the case anymore. Now, if you're looking at these lines, the darker line is going to be the average price of what the card is going to be listed for online, and the market price is what it has been recently selling at. So typically you'll see the dark blue line above the light blue line. Regardless, yeah, this card is now around a, $5 or $6 card, so its price has increased 5 or 6 times. Which again is pretty crazy because this card is an uncommon. Now that being said, there is only one printing of it from back in Scars of Mirrodin. So unless this card is reprinted, well, I don't see its price coming down anytime in the near future. Again, there's a lot of treasure synergies right now in Commander. And yeah, just Dockside Extortionist. Think about this against a Dockside Extortionist. Have fun. Next up, though, another commander that spiked a card or two or even more is the Beamtown Bullies. The Beamtown Bullies is a 4/4 Ogre Devil Warrior with Vigilance and Haste that costs 1 black, red, green. It has tap, target opponent whose turn it is puts target non-legendary creature card from your graveyard onto the battlefield under their control. It gains haste, goaded at the beginning of the next end step, exile it. Speaking of unique, my goodness, is this a spicy and unique commander. It's kind of like a Zedru, but in Jund, but also a bad gifts commander just specifically for creatures that you also can take advantage of, whenever they have, an ETB or whatnot, or an attack trigger. So, similar to Zedru, but different. But yeah, just like Zedru, there are some incredibly brutal things that you can do with this commander. I mean, they even specified non-legendary, and they're still incredibly brutal things, and I'm sure they specified non-legendary just because of Phage. But yeah, we'll get to some brutal cards as well here. Because one card that I did highlight on that Cards to Pick Up episode was Eater of Days. Eater of Days is a 9/8 Leviathan with Flample that costs 4. So again, just with that, yeah, you can force an opponent to have to swing at another opponent with a 9/8 Flampling Leviathan. But of course, on top of that, and the reason this is so good with this commander and why it's so brutal, is that it says, when it comes into play, you skip your next 2 turns. So that opponent that we force to get this creature out and swing with at another one of our opponents has to miss their next 2 turns. That is incredibly brutal, and again, there really aren't any other commanders out there that work with this card in that way. And of course, because of its massive downside, there really aren't too many commanders out there that can use this, and it sees very little play in Commander. But now let's also take a look at the MTG stocks chart on Eater of Days. Unlike Viridian Revel, Eater of Days does have 2 printings, but yeah, its price definitely went up since the reveal of this brand new commander. Its price went from around $2 or so to, well, the price that it was trying to be sold for immediately after the reveal of this commander, around $8. Now, of course, the average price of this card online has gone down a bit, but it's still around $6 or so, and yeah, the market is starting to pay more and more for this card, that getting up to around $5. But yeah, obviously this card is incredibly specific and probably won't see a reprint anytime in the near future. But yeah, this card is incredibly brutal with the brand new commander, and because of its uniqueness and the commander's uniqueness, its price definitely increased. And another card that I highlighted on that Cards to Pick Up episode that spiked even more so is Hellcarver Demon. This is a 6/6 demon with flying that costs 3 black, 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 and it says, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, sacrifice all the permanents you control and discard your hand. Exile the top 6 cards of your library. You may cast any number of non-land cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. This is incredibly brutal. I mean, if you thought Eater of Days was brutal, making someone miss 2 turns, this is basically like, hey, you're going to swing with this 6/6 flyer at someone other than me, and yeah, thanks for dishing out that damage for me, appreciate that. When you do that, you sacrifice everything you have, and you lose your hand. And at the end of the turn, you exile this Hellcarver Demon, which is the only thing you had left in play. Well, okay, unless you hit a couple things off the top that you can cast, but sure, cast maybe a couple things off the top. You basically are just out of the game. You're essentially back to turn 1, except you don't have a hand, so yes, you very much just lose. And now, of course, let's take a look at the price of Hellcarver Demon at MTGstocks.com, and yeah, this card, like Viridian Revel, only had 1 printing and still does, but unlike Viridian Revel, this is also a mythic. So when the Beamtown Boys was spoiled, this card went from around $1 to having an average price, an average list price of like $18 or so. Now, obviously, some time has passed since then, and yeah, it seems like the average price and the market price have finally leveled out and caught up to each other around $12. But still, this $1 card or so shot up all the way to around $12 just because one new commander is spoiled. And yeah, this card is incredibly specific, and I definitely don't see it being reprinted anytime soon. It's not the type of card that basically any deck outside of Alex's incredibly spicy deck, which Eddie and I did a spicy decks episode, so check that out at some point on that one. Basically, no other decks want this. So again, a unique card with 1 printing that is a mythic, and it works perfectly with a new commander. Yeah, that is a recipe for a card to just go up in price incredibly quickly. Moving on, ironically, recently I did an episode on what, in my opinion, might be one of the best worst cards of all time with Tempting Worm. I mean, this thing is spicy. And yeah, this little guy just spiked in price. So, Tempting Worm is a 5/5 worm for 1 and a green from Onslaught. This is definitely one of the nostalgic sets, and I definitely remember this card. Its Oracle text reads, when it enters the battlefield, each opponent may put any number of artifact, creature, enchantment, and/or land cards from their hand onto the battlefield. So, yeah, I mean, in a format like Standard, yeah, that might actually work out for you. Cool, turn 2, I get down a 5/5. Awesome. If they don't have anything really to dump from their hand into play, maybe we're playing against a Spellslinger deck. I've got a 5/5 for 2 mana, and they might not get anything really out of this. Maybe a land or 2. But of course, in a format like Commander, well, this can be an incredibly spicy play just on its own, allowing all of your opponents to drop down a ton of things. So yeah, a group hug strategy might utilize this card to just cause some chaos. That being said, obviously with the Beamtown Bullies, this works a bit differently because you put it into play under an opponent's control, and then all of that opponents, that includes yourself, gets to put basically all their stuff down from their hand into play. So yeah, obviously if you've got some massive things in your hand to put down, this can get pretty brutal. And that player that got this little 5/5 that is goated gets nothing out of it. So yeah, everyone else can just skyrocket past that player. Now, like Hellcarver Demon and like Viridian Revel, there is only one printing of this card from all the way back in Onslaught, and it's a rare. And yeah, with how unique and strange it is, I don't really see it getting reprinted anytime soon. And yes, this card has gone up from being around a $1 or so card all the way up to having an average price of $7.89 with a market price that is creeping up as well to around $6. So yeah, it appears that Beamtown Bully players out there are starting to pay up for this card. And yeah, with a big splashy play like that one, I can see why. Next up, the final card that I want to highlight that was impacted because of the Beamtown Bullies, which, yeah, had a ton of impact on cards, is Bronze Bombshell. It's a 4/1 construct that says, whenever a player other than Bronze Bombshell's owner controls it, that player sacrifices it. If the player does, Bronze Bombshell deals 7 damage to them. So, obviously, just, with this commander, you meet that requirement. You say, okay, Bronze Bombshell's in my graveyard. I'll tap my commander, I'll give this opponent Bronze Bombshell. Oh no, that player controls it, but they don't own it. Sacrifice it, deal 7 damage to you. And then obviously it goes back to the graveyard, so you can do that again when you can tap your commander again. And yeah, if you've got a lot of ways to untap your commander, you can make a lot out of this and take out players very quickly. And now again, like I've said with those previous cards that only had 1 printing, yeah, this only has 1 printing from Dissension, and it was a rare. So yeah, this is a pretty old card with a very specific effect that I definitely don't see being reprinted anytime soon. And yeah, before that commander was spoiled, well, it started off being around a $2 or so card, and all of a sudden now its average price that it's being sold for is around $10, and its market price is starting to creep up as well, where players are paying around $8 or so for it. So yeah, it's got a price of increase around 3 or 4 times its price before this commander was spoiled. Yeah, with a commander as unique as the Beamtown Bullies, it had a massive impact on a lot of prices. But now let's move on to another commander with Mari the Killing Quill. Mari is a 3/2 vampire assassin for 1 black that says, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, exile it with a hit counter on it. And assassins, mercenaries, and rogues you control have death touch, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may remove a hit counter from a card that player owns in exile. If you do, draw a card and create 2 treasure tokens. So this commander is a very spicy 3-tribe commander in a way. Again, it kind of brings together assassins, mercenaries, and rogues and makes them very deadly and able to generate a ton of value for you in no time. All you need to do is keep taking out your opponent's creatures and getting them exiled with more and more hit counters on them, and then your army is going to do the rest for you. And yeah, when a brand new tribal commander comes out like this one that might, bring together different tribes or utilize tribes that might not really have a commander yet, certain cards can definitely spike in price that work very well with it. Because, yeah, Scarblade Elite is the card that I definitely want to highlight with this one. A 2/2 elf assassin that costs black, and it has tap, remove an assassin card in your graveyard from the game, destroy target creature. Now, up to this point, there really hasn't been an assassin tribal commander. And yes, okay, comment below. Changelings. Yes, changelings are technically all tribes, but you know what I mean. Regardless, because of that, this card has not seen a lot of play because it is very specific. You obviously need to have a good amount of assassin creatures in your deck to make this worthwhile. So of course, with a new commander that can heavily utilize some fantastic assassins out there, well, this can become incredibly impactful. Because, yeah, this can be a great way to keep taking out your opponent's creatures and getting them exiled with hit counters on them. This is a low to the ground, repeatable destroy creature effect that is incredibly impactful with this commander. And as you might be guessing, like I've mentioned with many of the other cards in this episode, this is the only printing, one printing from Morningtide at rare. So a very low supply with a brand new commander definitely caused this price to spike. Now, that being said, if we look at the chart, you can see when Mari was actually spoiled, this card jumped up from like 20 or so cents all the way up to around $15 for the average price that was listed online. Now, that being said, obviously, as you can see, that price has decreased quite a bit since that because, well, the market didn't seem to be paying that price. With the market being unwilling to pay that price, though, the market did increase over time to around $3 or so, and we can see the average price is still well above that at $6. So where this price actually ends up is probably going to be somewhere between that regardless. So going from like a 20-cent card or so all the way up to a card that players are now paying $3 for is a massive increase. And of course, again, if this settles in between the two prices around, I don't know, $4 or $5 or so, it's going to be even more. So yeah, definitely a big increase for a creature that is effective in a tribal deck that really hasn't had a home yet. And finally, one card that I do want to highlight from this set that is not a commander but did cause a price spike for another card is Vivian on the Hunt. Vivian is a legendary planeswalker that starts off with 4 loyalty, and her +2 is you may sacrifice a creature. If you do, search your library for a creature card with mana value equal to 1+ the sacrificed creature's mana value, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. So if that sounds familiar, well, that's because this is basically like birthing pod on a planeswalker, which of course can be incredibly broken. And of course, there are loops that you can get into with this and basically go infinite and win. And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go through them here, but because there is this potential for an incredibly powerful play with this planeswalker, another card spiked. And that would be Planebound Accomplice, a 1/3 human wizard for 2 in a red that says, pay a red, you may put a planeswalker card from your hand onto the battlefield, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So this is basically sneak attack, but on a creature and for planeswalkers instead of creatures. And up to this point, yeah, there are some pretty powerful things that you can do with this by cheating out a planeswalker and activating an ability, right away essentially for just 1 mana, but nothing really as broken as with this brand new planeswalker where you essentially have a birthing pod that can go infinite pretty easily. So yeah, essentially just get this down with a new Vivian in your hand, pay 1 single red mana, and then you are off to the races. And speaking of off to the races, let's take a look at MTG stocks to see the pricing on this card. Now, like I've mentioned with pretty much every other card in this episode, it should not surprise you, but there's only one printing of this card so far, and that was in the original Modern Horizons. But unlike a lot of the other cards that I mentioned in this episode, this card really isn't all that old. Again, Modern Horizons came out in June of 2019. That being said, with this new Planeswalker being spoiled, its price did increase a ton. I mean, we're talking about its price going from like 10 cents or so all the way up to, well, again, the average price went up to trying to get around $4 or so for it. And now it's kind of settled around $3 or $3.30 for the market and the average. But still, yeah, that is a massive increase from 10 or so cents. So yeah, apparently it took a pretty broken birthing pod style planeswalker to break this price wide open. With all that said though, I am sure there are some card price spikes that I missed because of the impact from new cards from Streets of New Capenna, so please let me know in the comments below. Personally, I think it's a very fascinating thing to see what kinds of cards spike based on what kind of new commanders, and yeah, it's just a really interesting thing to follow. And yeah, I hope you also found this to be interesting, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again, and have a good one.